Morning, learning as Chusr for Shlema, Bilan Chaya Baserach. We're on the top of Tzadi Ches Amid Aleph, 7 lines from the top. But Kama Amma Beininus. We've been discussing about the Amma Beininus, which we've always been saying it's 6 Amas, but we didn't know what where that came from. Rabbi Yechanan Shisha Tvach. Rabbi Yechanan says it's Shisha Tvach. Rabbi Yossi Bar Ov and Afanana Mitina. I also have this from a Brisa. Ramei Omer Hashulchan Tzadi Ches Amid Aleph. Sit like 6, 7 lines at the top. Amar Rav Yosef Bar Ov and Afanana Mitina Ramei Omer Hashulchan Orchoi Shnayim Eser V'Rachvay Shisha. In our Mishnah, we had brought the machlokes about the length and width of the shulchan. So Ramei said the shulchan was 12 long and 6 wide, because he said that was the 2 by 1 amas was 12 by 6. It means each amma was 6 tvach. From its name, from the fact that it's called the amma beinanis, obviously there was the 5 tefach amma. We were always discussing in the past or blah difference between the 5. We said generally the rule was everything was 6 amma. So we said certain parts of the machlokes about different areas or different things were 5 tvachim amma, but from the fact that the 6 tvachim amma is called the amma beinanis, it means there must be something that's even bigger than 6 tvachim, more tvachim in the amma. Zoktamara in Enochanami, there is a amma that is even bigger than 6 tvachim, but Tanan, and we saw in a Mishnah. Was that Mishnah? In Caleb. Shtei amas hayu b'shushan habira. There were 2 amas. In this case, is talking about measuring sticks. And Shushan Habira, the Gemara is going to explain, was a lishka, was one of the chambers in the Beis Hamikdash, which is called the Shushan Habira, after the famous Shushan of the Megillah. And so the 2 measuring sticks that they kept in this room, Achas al Karen Mizrachas Tzvainis, one was in the northeast corner, Achas al Karen Mizrachas Droimis, what was in the southeast corner. Shal Karen Mizrachas Tzvainis Yisera al Shal Moshe Chatzi Etzba. The one in the northeastern corner was 1/2 of a finger width bigger than this regular 6 amma tefach. Shal Karen Mizrachas Droimis Yisera le Chatzi Etzba. And the one in the other corner was even 1/2 etzba bigger than the first one. So one was 6 1/2 of an etzba, and one was 6 and a full etzba per amma. He was going to explain why we had these measuring sticks. The second one, since it was 1/2 etzba more than the first one, was a full fingers longer than 6 tvachim in an amma. Why did they have one large one and one small one? When they would hire workers, craftsmen, to do work in the Beis Hamikdash, so these craftsmen would say, okay, I'm going to give you, let's say a yard of wood, or let's say not a yard, but an amma of wood for $10. And so they would take out they would go to measure the amount of, let's say, I guess the different way to do it. They said, let's see how much wood we need for this stretch. There's something broken, then we'll measure it. They measured it with a regular amma of 6 tvachim. Then, when they would go to measure their wood to fix it, they would use a slightly larger measuring stick. Because when you're dealing with the Beis Hamikdash, you have to always lose a little bit. Yeah, in order that you shouldn't if you do try to be too precise, you could come out that you gave a tiny bit less than what you had said you were going to give, or what was paid for. So then that extra wood that's kept by the craftsman, he'll be over a me'ilah for using it. So that's more of a tarti lamali. Why did we need one that was a 1/2 etzba more, and one that was a full etzba more? Chada kasb dahava v'chada lebinyana. One was when you're dealing with silver and gold, so the overage was very little. It was only a half a etzba more because it was very expensive. They didn't want to have so much leeway. But when you're talking about construction materials, you're talking about sheetrock or wood, then they would use or copper. They would use they give themselves a little extra leeway. Tanan Hasan. Shar HaMizrach. Shar HaMizrach Olav Shushan Habira Surah. The eastern gate of meaning in the Azar, in the Heichel, had a picture of Shushan Habira. It had a engraving of Shushan Habira, of the city of Shushan. My time, what was the reason for this? Rav Chizda, Rav Yitzchak bar Avdimi, they had a machlokes. Chadam Kadeshi Yadu Mehechem Bo. Said everyone should know that they should have Akar Satoiv. That means after the events of Purim, uh, I think it was Esther's son, allowed the Yidden to go back to Eretz Yisrael, back to the Beis Hamikdash. He rebuilt the Beis Hamikdash. So this is as a Isav Akar Satoiv. Like that's why I think in Ponevezh, they would fly the Israeli flag. And back when I was young, yeshivas often had an American flag in front of it. Now I think you get kicked out of the club if you do that. You're supposed to throw a Akar Satoiv to the country that you're part of, the ones that run things. In a similar svara to show that the people should be aware that during the time of the Beis Hamikdash, the Persians were still in control. So they put up a thing of Shushan Habira to remind everyone that you'd have to be scared of the king. You should always be afraid of the government. When Moshe Rabbeinu was telling Pare what's going to happen when the Yidden get out of Mitzrayim, he told Pare, all of you Avadim are going to come and bow down to me. But he didn't tell Pare that Pare himself was going to bow down to me, because you have to show respect for the king. The Rebbe Shalom came to Eliyahu. He ran in front of Achav. Achav was a very big Rasha, but nevertheless, even so, Eliyahu ran in front of him Ad Bayacha Yisrael, until he came to Israel to show cover to the Melech. Pasuk says another machlokes between these Amoraim, Rav Chizda, Rav Yitzchak bar Avdimi, va'aleyu l'trufa. Pasuk says this is all part of the vision, the Chazon Yecheskel, the vision of Yecheskel, and he says that that by the banks of the river is going to come up leaves va'aleyu l'trufa that will heal. Rav Chizda Rav Yitzchak bar Avdimi chadam lahater pesha l'mayla. One says it will give a voice to the mute. Another one says it's going to open up the Pesach below, which the Gemara explains, to let the mute speak. It's going to open up, when we said the Peshalamata, the lower mouth, it means it's going to make barren women fertile. They're going to be able to bear children. Tanur Ilu nemav lakachta selis v'afisa oisai shtayim esrei chalas. We have basically, the pasuk says three separate things, three psukim, three standards that you have to do when you make the lechem apanim. We all know that the lechem apanim is 12 loaves, and we know that it was made into 2 sedarim, 2 stacks of 6 each. And the pasuk says all this. It says it says it should be 12 chalas, and also says samta oisa shtei marachos, and it says it should be in two stacks. So had the pasuk just said that, had it not said 6, that each stack should be 6. So you see, if we wouldn't have said that each stack is of 6, I would say they don't have to be the same size. Lekach nemar sheish. That's why the pasuk also says the samta oiser shtayim marachas sheish hamarocha. The pasuk says not only that there's going to be 2 marachas from the 12, but it also says it's going to be 6 in each. Bilu nemar shtayim marachas sheish hamarachas. Had it just said that there are 2 stacks of 6 each. V'loy nemar shtayim esrei, but I didn't say that it's a total of 12. I would have thought that when the pasuk says that, I would have thought that the last time that the Torah says amaracha, it says there should be 2 stacks of 6. But then when it says maracha again, I would have thought that's a reference to a third maracha. I would have thought it would be a total of 18. Therefore, it says it's a total of 12 to those who don't misunderstand the last reference to a maracha to be an extra maracha. Had it said that it was 12 chalis and it was 2 stacks, multiple stacks, but it didn't say shtayim, and it didn't say that each one was 2 stacks with 6 in each. You see, arba. I would think there would be 3 or 4 if you didn't say specifically that it was 2 stacks of 6 each. That's why you also had to say shtayim v'sheis. But had we not said all 3 of these psukim, we would not have known the proper way to bring the lechem. Okay, so how taka do you bring the lechem? You bring 2 stacks of 6 each. If the Kehanim did 1 of 8 and 1 of 4, you're not yetzer. Shtayim shel sheva sheva. If he brought 2 stacks of 7 each. Now I would think the problem with, I don't remember if Rashi said this, but I would think the problem of having 1 of 4 and 1 of 8, I don't know if these drushes are, I guess the Gemara seems to be suggesting that it's these psukim ali kuva. But we also said before the amount that the shulchan is mekadesh. The shulchan is being mekadesh the lechem. So we had the machlekes. Some before we said maybe we know that the lechem was already mekadesh from the tanur. Maybe that's not really the reason. It's just coming straight from the psukim. That the psukim said you have to have 6 and 6. So now the Gemara asks, what about shtayim shel sheva sheva? What happens if you have 2 stacks of 7? Rabbi Aimer royanis al yoina kilu eino. That case it will be kosher, even though you have 2 extra, because you could just disregard the 2 on top. You still have 6 on bottom. The first case you had 4 and 8, so the stack of 4 was missing. But over here you just have extra. Al. The pasuk says you should put on the lechem. You have to put the spoons with the levina on top of the lechem. And if you have an extra one that's not valid, that's being chaitzitz between you're not placing the levina directly on the lechem. Rabbi is going l'shitas dama al basama. He says when it says al, it doesn't mean directly on, it means nearby. The Tanya Rabbi Yom and Rasat al Marechas Levina Zaka. You should put on the Marechas Levina Zaka al Basamach. Al just means nearby, it doesn't mean on top. And we had this before when we had this discussion, the discussion of whether the spoons were put, if there was a gap in between the chalas, according to Manama, that it was wider, so there was room in between the two stacks of bread. So we said that the bezichim will put in between them. So we asked, it says al. We said before that al doesn't mean on top, it just means nearby. That time we proved it from the fact that it said that the degel machne Menachos was on Ephraim. It doesn't mean it was on top of it, it means it was nearby. Now we learn a different pshara. Maybe al means directly on top. There's a koisa al aron, it's a paroiches. The Torah says you're going to cover over the aron with the paroiches. The paroiches was the curtain between the Kachay Kachim and the Heichel. But it calls it Al Aron as a Parechas. But obviously, what it means over there is that the Parechas was near the Aron. Haviyomer Al Basamach. So that's a raya that Al means nearby. It doesn't mean on top. So we said in the Mishnah, Kol HaKelim Shebemikdash. The Mishnah said that all the kelim in the Mikdash were made with their length parallel to the length of the Beis Hamikdash. It means we saw the Beis Hamikdash was 187 amas long, so all the kelim were also placed lengthwise within the heichal. As we're going to see, there were a number of exceptions. Tanarabban, kol kelim shebemikdash archel la'archel shel bayis. All the kelim were placed with their length parallel to the length of the Beis Hamikdash. Chutz me aron, except for the aron she'archel la'rachvei shel bayis. The aron's length was placed in the width of the bayis. Right, the aron was 2.5 by 1.5. So that 2.5 was placed, right? The Beis Hamikdash went east to west, and so the aron, the 2.5 length of the aron, went from north to south. Okay, we're on the bottom of Tzadi Chesam and Aleph. We just quoted from Mishnah that all of the kelim in the Beis Hamikdash were placed parallel to the length of the Beis Hamikdash. The bottom of Tzadi Chesam and Aleph. So but the aron was an exception. The aron was placed its length to the width. V'kachaya munach, v'kachaya badav munach. The Brisa says that's the way it was placed, and that's the way the poles that were used to carry the aron. That's the way it was placed. My comment, what does it mean? That's the way it's placed, and that's the way its poles are placed. Kachaya munach midibadav kachaya munach. The reason why it was placed differently than all the other kelim, with its length to the width of the kachay kachim, is because of the badim. Because the badim required, the badim, as we're going to see, were placed on the two narrow sides of they were placed parallel to the narrow sides, perpendicular to the long sides of the aron. And therefore, those badim were placed with their length, the same length as the Beis Hamikdash. Ubadav minalan. How do we know that badav had to be placed running east to west with the length of the Beis Hamikdash? The Tanya, ayerichu abadim. They placed the length of the badim, that they placed them with their length, and like we say, yachalei hayu noigim b'paraychas. Maybe the length of the badim did not touch the paraychas. Tamalai mavayiru. They were seen, that the badim were able to be seen outside of the curtain that covered the opening into the kachay kachim. Is the pasuk vayarichu abadim vayero roshei abadim in hakodesh apnei advir, that the badim were set up, and that the tips of these poles that we used to hold the aron were able to be seen sticking out from minadvir, from pnei advir, from the kachay kachim. They weren't entirely seen outside. So Zaktimara, if it says that it was seen, maybe they would rip the paraychas open and they would let the poles stick out so people could see the poles that hold the aron. Talmud Leimer, the pasuk says, but they weren't seen. Okay, so what does that mean? How could something be seen and not seen? It would there was a curtain that covered the entrance into the kachay kachim, and the badim would stick into it, and they'd be able to see the shape of the badim from outside. It was like the two dadim of a isha, that when the cloth was sticking out. Shinamar tzor hamar doidili ben shadayal. That the bundle of mar, which is a kind of psamim, my daidi, my beloved is to me, ben shadayal, will rest between her dadim. Uminalan the bada of lepusya da aron yas. So this is all. Let's get back to why are we saying this? We said that the aron was, instead of being lengthwise with its length parallel to the length of the Beis Hamikdash, it was the other way around, because we know that the badav the badim, the poles, were placed on the narrow sides of the Aron, and we know that the badim stuck out into the Heichel, so they were obviously going the long way in the Beis Hamikdash. That means the Aron was facing the other way. Right? If the poles are on the narrow sides, that means that the length of the Aron was perpendicular to the length of the Beis Hamikdash. But the question is, how do we know that the badim were on the narrow sides, on the width of the Aron? Maybe they were on the length. Rabbi Yehuda, Trey Gavri ba'amsu palga loy mistagi. The reason is because the Gemara somehow understood that the way the Aron was carried is that there were two people standing shoulder to shoulder inside of the poles. There were two people in the front and two people in the back. And each pair of two was sitting in between the poles. The Aron was 2.5 by 1.5. So if the poles were along the length, they went the same length as the Aron, it would only be 1.5 amas between the two poles. That's not enough room for two men to stand. So therefore it has to have been the other way, that the poles were on the width, so that there were 2.5, the whole length of the Aron was between them. And then the two men could stand in between the poles, each one with a pole on his shoulder. And there was, in 2.5 amas, is enough room for two men. How do we know that the Aron was carried by 4 men, meaning 2 men in between each of the two poles? So Trey, it says the Kahasim carried it. It's a Lashon Rabbim, that's 2. Noisei HaMikdash, Nami Trey. And it says also Noisei HaMikdash, another 2. So 4 people, that means 2 on each side of the Aron. Taner Rabban. Asara Shulchanos also Shlomo HaMelech. Shlomo HaMelech made 10 Shulchanos. In addition to the Shulchan of Moshe Rabbeinu that was discussed in Chumash, he made an extra 10 tables. At this point, we don't know yet what those tables were used for. We're going to have a machlekes later on if they would do the avodah of the lechem apanim on those tables as well as Moshe. Shenema v'yas shulchanos asara. He made 10 shulchans v'yanach b'heichel. 5 mimin v'chamisha mismal. 5 on the right and 5 on the left. If you'll think that when it says on the left and the right, that means 5 on the left of the entrance into the Heichel and 5 on the right, that can't be. That would come out that the Shulchan was in the south. But that the Shulchan was placed only in the northern section. It can't be in the southern half. So what it means is that it doesn't mean to the right and left of the door to the Heichel, but rather it means to the right and left of the original Shulchan. 5 on its right and 5 on its left. Now we're going to have a big problem soon. How do you fit all of these Shulchanos into the area on the left side of the on the tzafon side of the Beis Hamikdash of the Heichel? These Shulchanos were the same size as the original Shulchan. We know that the original Shulchan was 1 amma by 2 amma, so we're going to have to fit it all in. In addition to the 10 tables, he also made 10 menorahs. He made 10 menorahs in the proper way. 5 on the right and 5 on the left. In that case, the menorah is also going to be on the wrong side. 5 of them would be on the north. The menorah was opposite the shulchan, meaning the shulchan was supposed to be on the north, and the menorah was supposed to be in the south. If you remember, we had the Gemara before that said they were on opposite sides. So people would see that the Rebbe Shalom doesn't need the bread of the shulchan, he doesn't need the light of the menorah. It's only there for covet, but it's not that the Rebbe Shalom Chatz Shalom needs their physical, what they physically provide. So that's why they're placed far away from each other on the opposite ends. But in any case, the menorah could not be in the north, so therefore it couldn't have been. The 10 extra menorahs could not be half on one side and half on the other. Just like we said by the Shulchan, there were 5 on each side of the original menorah of Moshe. One man Amma says that the shulchanis were placed halfway into the bayis, halfway into the heichal. It means in the inner half, closer to the kachi kachim. The tanichada mishlush habayis lefnim. It was after a third of the way into the heichal. Hayumanach. V'loy kasha. These do not contradict each other. Marka chosher base kachi hagadosha b'hadi heichal. One mandam was counting the entire area of the heichal plus the kachi kachim. The heichal was 40 amas. The kachi kachim was 20 amas. So he was saying you go halfway in. So that means you're 2/3. I'm sorry. No, it's 40 and 30. So if you say, so he said a third of the way in. A third of the way in is 20 amas into the 40 amas of the heichal, which is a third of the entire 60 amas together. The other man was saying it's halfway. He was just counting the heichal. So again, it's 20 amas into the heichal. So whether you count 20 amas out of 60 is a third, or 20 amas out of 40 is a half, but they both meant the same thing. Tanaraban, Mizrach u'Mayrav hayu Menachos. One man, the Amma says they were placed Mizrach to Mayrav, the Shulchanis. The other man, the Amma says they were placed north to south. My time, this is obviously these brises are chaylik on what we said before, that these are exceptions. There's going to be exception to what we said before. In addition to the Aron that we said was placed north to south, which is against not the same length as the length of the Beis Hamikdash. He's saying this Rav Elazar of Shimon said that the Shulchan had the same din. My time of the Rebbe, why does Rebbe say it goes the length? You learn out from Menorah. Ma Menorah Mizrach u'Mayrav. Just like the Menorah was Mizrach u'Mayrav, like we said, everything was Mizrach u'Mayrav. Afani nami Mizrach u'Mayrav. So the Shulchan was just like the Menorah. Or Menorah Gufa Minalan. How does he know the Menorah was lengthwise? Midachsiv b'ner Marabi Yarech Hoysei Aaron Lifnei Hashem. That the Ner Marabi, the Ner all the way on the most western side, should be placed opposite Lifnei Hashem. That one was going toward that was the one that was facing the Kachay Kachim. So if it's going to be facing toward the Ma'ariv, that was so it must. It's a little backward. No. So the one on the Ma'ariv was facing toward the Kachay Kachim. It means the others were not the closest to Hashem. If the menorah was facing north to south, they were all equally close to the Ma'ariv. My time, what's the reason for Rabbi Elazar of Shimon that he says that the menorah was placed in the east to west? North to south. Gama Me'aron, he learns from the Aron. The Aron also, like we said before, we learned from its Badav that it was facing north to south, perpendicular to the length of the Beis Hamikdash. Aron Safim Dharma, Afhani Nami Safim Dharma. The Shulchan was learned out from the Aron. Rabbi Nami Ligma Me'aron. Why doesn't Rabbi learn out the Shulchan from Menorah, from the Aron? Danun Chutz Michutz. He'd rather learn the Shulchan from the Menorah. He proved that the menorah was going east to west, so therefore he'd rather learn out the shulchan, which was also in the heichal, with the aron that it should also go east to west. They don't not learn out the shulchan from the aron. Elazar of Shimon ligma menorah. Why doesn't Rabbi Elazar of Shimon learn from the menorah? L'chayr, it's a good taina. Amalach menorah gufatzaf v'darim hava menachos. He disagrees with Rabbi. He says that the menorah went in the other direction. The taka went from north to south. Ela hadiksiv yarachas Aaron abanav. What about what we said that they arranged it, that it was facing? We said that it was what was the pshat? We said before that it was facing toward the menorah was facing with the kaisel hamaravi. I'm sorry, the ner hamaravi was facing toward the base, the kaidish, to the ma'ariv. I'm sorry, I lost my place. The mitzad le'atzudi. It was mitzad le'atzudi. I'm forgetting what that was again. Let's see. The Tanya al mo pnei amayra yiru sheva aneres la'yir mitzadem pneim klapi nerem tzoi. It just means to say that they faced toward the ner hamaravi, that they faced toward that middle one, and that middle one, its light was turned to face toward the ma'ariv, but it doesn't mean the whole menorah had one ner that was most toward the ma'ariv. It means that the whole menorah was taka widthwise toward the ma'ariv, but one ner had its light turned that way. Amr Nasan, Mikan Shem Tzai Meshubach. And this you see that the middle is the most meshubach. According to the Manda Amar, that it went from Mizrach to Ma'ariv. These 10 shulchanis of Shlomo all the shulchanis went from east to west. Like again, we said the Heichel was 40 amos long and it was 20 amos wide. So if it goes from east to west, so you had 10 that were in the 10 that were in that 40 all fit in to the into that side. That means it would really be in the second half, because we said it had to be in the second the 20 amos that was closer to the Beis Hamikdash, to the Kachei Kachim. The assumption was that all 10 of these shulchanis that were 2 amos long, all at this point the Gemara assumes that they were all in one long line. So you fit 10 times 2 is 20. They fit exactly into that second half. According to the Mandama that went from north to south, Yud b'chof heichi havi yasvi. How do you have 10 tables of 2 amos each in a 20 amma size space? That means if you have extra space, if you put 20 into 40, so even if it sticks out a little bit, it works out. But if you try to put 20 exactly into 20, it never works. You can't have such precise tolerances. So it wouldn't fit. So if you put it widthwise, it's going to get stuck. If you have 10 tables that go exactly from one end of the heichel to the other side of the heichel, the chaim are not going to be able to walk through. In addition, you're also going to have 5 of the shulchanos in the darim, and we said before that the shulchan has to be in the tzafin. Where did they put the shulchan of Moshe? We're assuming now that the shulchan of Moshe was in the same line. Where did they put the shulchan of Moshe? If you put an extra shulchan and you have 11, that's 22 amos. So 2 of the amos are going to extend into the second half, into the back half of the heichel. There were really 2 lines of shulchanos, each one with 5 shulchan, that was 10 amos long. So Bishlam according to Mandam, that it went from north to south, shop that, then it works out fine. You had two lines with the one of Moshe in between, and it works out fine. According to Mandam, that they were facing Mizrach to Ma'ariv, meaning from the direction of the Kachei Kachim toward the midpoint of the Heichel, Michli. The first line of the 2 lines of 10 amos long had to be 2.5 amos from the wall of the Heichel in order to allow the 2 Kohanim to bring the 2 lechem upon there. The Amadi day, then you have the amav with the width of the table itself. The beni. You have to have another 2.5 to bring the chalas for the next line of chalas. And it means between those two and the one of Moshe. And then the Moshe's shulchan and the next line of 10 is another 2.5. Beni ve'amadi day. So we already counted up 7.5 for the spaces, plus 3 for the actual shulchan stuck. The achol shulchan palga da'amsa b'darim. So you're going to end up pushing this whole toward the side. You're going to have the second line of shulchanos, a half Abamed is going to be on the northern side of the Heichel. So no, Misav shulchan the Moshe b'hadayu havi. No, the shulchan of Moshe was not in middle of the two other lines of shulchanos. The midli lay umanach lay. It was on top. It was. I think, is there any pictures here? There's a picture in the Rashi on the side that it was set off in front, so it didn't have to be a full 2.5 in between the shulchanos and that of Moshe. It was a little bit set off, like a student sitting in front of his Rebbe. Okay, we'll stop over here.
Thank you. Have a great day.
You too.
This is with the volume 8.